Hello, good morning, and welcome here live from The Hague, where we are welcoming you on behalf of the Dutch Council for the Environment and Infrastructure at the online event Changing Tracks, Improving International Rail Transport Through Corridor Coordination. We're going to find out what that means and how we can achieve that. My name is Gerrit Heikoop and I have the honor to host you here this morning, but I'm glad I don't have to do that alone. On my side is Jeroen Kok. Jeroen, good morning.
Good morning, Gerrit.
You have several roles in the field of international rail transportation, but this morning, most importantly, you're sitting next to me as the chair of the committee of the Council who prepared a report earlier this year.
Exactly.
Can you explain to our viewers who've not yet familiarized themselves with the report, what is the context of this online event?
Well, the event is about, of course, letting everybody know about this report. The letter has been sent, but this is paper. So to make a difference, we have to act.
Yeah.
And this event is about how we can act and how we can get that ball rolling in making international rail more attractive.
Yeah, because through rail, I think we can make an impressive impact on the sustainability efforts that we have in Europe. The Green Deal is very ambitious. Europe as a climate neutral continent by 2050. What role can rail play in that?
Well, the interesting thing is that, especially today, also during the pandemic, we all know that being connected between the important European regions is essential. And rail does provide a real perfect, sustainable alternative to achieve that.
Yeah.
The trick is, though, that until now, even though all the efforts have been put into the infrastructure and policy papers have been published, the share of mobility of international rail is still very limited. So what can we do to really make sure that this becomes an attractive alternative to achieve that sustainable alternative to connect people in Europe?
Beautiful, beautiful assignment that we have here together. Also for you, in a moment we're going to dive deeper into the context of why we're here, who's involved, how it all works. But I first want to quickly explain that this is not a one-way street. This is just not another lean-back webinar. This is what we call an online event. And in that, it's important that you participate. In many ways, like in a real event, it's fun. It helps you to really pick up the takeaways from this event, but it also allows you to influence what happens here in our little studio in The Hague. You can send in questions, comments, additions, but we can also ask questions to you. And we will do that throughout the program, and we're going to practice that a little bit. So if you are watching on the RLI website, you see on the right side of your screen an interactivity box where you can both send in questions and I can send questions to you. And a couple of minutes ago, I launched our first survey to find out who do we have online? Who is in our virtual room here together? 4 little questions. If you haven't done so, please fill them out. All 4, scroll all the way to the bottom and hit send. So we see the results appearing live in here. So let me quickly check. My first question was, Jeroen, what field or sector do you work in? Couple of options, and we see currently the most voted option is in government science, about 38% of the people voting. We see 26% in other, so they don't fit any of the boxes. 13% of the voters say passenger operations. We see infrastructure management, NGOs, mobility services, and freight operations. Nobody showed up from freight. Well, that could be interesting, right? Because we're talking about corridors here today. In the freight rail operations, they already have a concept like that, but we'll soon find more about that. A council, like the Dutch Council for Environment and Infrastructure, in which of these boxes does that fit?
That's a good question. I think that would be probably other, but otherwise somewhere between NGO and government.
And other.
So I think governments would be the closest.
Exactly. So we'll touch upon the report and more importantly the letter to the EU Commission that was countersigned by a lot of other councils, and that will probably explain that why you're watching and joining. I have a few more questions. Obviously, we have an international aim. We want to connect the entirety of Europe, and here we see a little word cloud of the people currently joining. Still, a lot of people from the Netherlands. Our ambition is to bring this work, which was done by the Dutch Council, much broader further into Europe, obviously because the topic desires that. So we see already people joining from Germany, from Switzerland, from Spain, Czech Republic, Norway, Belgium, luckily they're there as well. Sweden is with us. So it seems it's starting to work, but there's more to be done. So please, if you're now watching this live, use any means at your disposal, whether it is LinkedIn, Twitter, WhatsApp groups, internal mailing lists. Send this email around, send them to this link, because for the next 2 hours they can still join and participate. Or if they end up here late, they can at least watch this entire program back in recording. 2 more questions, Jeroen. I also asked them, what do you hope to gain by attending this event? Let me show you some of the answers we see. First-hand information, awareness of the report and the reaction of the sector. More insight in common, ambitious, new perspective. Information. Well, information you will get, but we hope we can also get some engagement together as well. So together we can form and shape the future of the international passenger rail in Europe. And last question. What spatial level do you focus on in your work? And here we see, and this is positive news, 60% of the people participating in the poll says they work on a supranational level, basically international level, so they can oversee multiple borders, one of the key challenges in the topic today. 30% is national and a few regional actors as well. So welcome everyone. As you can see, you're not alone. We are in a very diverse crowd, and I think this meeting can be more fun and more interactive if you participate actively with us. 2 more things, and then we're done with the household messages. First of all, if you are an active participant on either Twitter or LinkedIn, we have a hashtag. It's useful because if you use the hashtag in your messages, you can then search for all the other online participants who are also tweeting or LinkedIning about this. So if you post about this event, a photo of how you are participating with us, key takeaways or insights, useful links to some of the other participants, use hashtag International Rail. In that way, we can search, you can search, and we can also connect on those platforms together. The last household message, we have a program for about 2 hours. I'm quickly going to introduce that to you in a minute. At the end, we're going to try to virtually replace how one of the best things of these conferences and events together is obviously after the event, having that cup of coffee, reflecting on what we've just heard, networking, meeting new people. So if you allow yourself to stay all the way to 12 o'clock, we will then open a virtual networking a Zoom meeting. You must be used to that as now, but we'll have a little fun with that. We'll throw around with our virtual European beach ball. You must stay tuned for that. And we'll connect you in little small groups, breakout groups, where you can connect with a few of your peers. It's going to be fun. That's at 12 o'clock. So, Jeroen, what can we expect? You already mentioned it in the promo, a full program. We're going to learn more about the letter and the report.
Yes.
We're going to learn more about, this corridor concept. What does it mean? We have Wijnand Veneman with us here in the studio to explain more about that. And then we kind of connect. We'll travel through Europe to all the different representatives in this international passenger rail sector. And I don't know if we already can see them. We have a full Zoom room with speakers who will talk to us, who will reflect on the report. Yes, there they are. Hello, good morning. Welcome to you all. If you can see and hear me, just wave hands up. We have Daniel Mes, Hinne Groot from the ministry, Joseph Doppelbauer is ready, Monica Heiming, Elisabeth Werner, and Lieber Lochman already joining us. So welcome all. Glad you're with us, and we're looking forward to hear about your reflections. That's about it. Let's get started. So, Jeroen, a mouthful, yes. A lot to start with, but let's dive into the content. You already mentioned there was a report and there's a letter.
Yes.
The report is a Dutch product, it's by the Dutch Council, but the topic is obviously so international that you gathered a lot of people to write a letter. Can you explain a little bit of the context?
Exactly, and thank you. Because we are a Dutch Council for the Environment and Infrastructure, but when we were looking at this topic, we thought like we have to start to practice what we preach. And so rather than focus only on the Dutch context, we thought to engage with our sister organizations internationally, because if our conclusion is going to be, let's work together on this, then we should do this as a council as well. So we're very proud that it's not only a report co-signed and letter co-signed by the Dutch Council, but also our Belgian colleagues, Luxembourg, 3 German councils, and endorsed from even Council in Ireland, Portugal, and Hungary.
Yeah, we have a nice slide with an overview of all the parties here at the bottom of the letter. And I think that's a first achievement, right? It shows that it is possible if we put ourselves together at ambitious goals, everybody comes together. Was it difficult to get these people to countersign?
No, it's like
co-sign, actually.
to co-sign.
Yeah.
I think no, it was very interesting and a good discussion. But indeed, it was new for everyone. So it's kind of nice to try these new things to get to work together internationally and make that happen.
Yeah, exactly. So the advisory councils are acting as a role model for all the policymakers and all the bodies that we talked to today. Let's dive one step deeper. This letter was sent on July 1st to the Commissioner Ardina Valian and also to Frans Timmermans and a few other commissioners. It's a 9-pager. You can download it right here on the website. Scroll a little bit down on the website. But you talk about a layered problem analysis because this is a multifaceted problem. Can you talk us through that?
Yes, I think when we looked at this problem, we realized that there are, regardless of all the efforts into this, some persistent barriers. But to understand the persistent barriers, we had to kind of have a good analysis framework. Mm-hmm. And that's where this 4-layered model came in very handy. So rather than looking at each of the individual layers, what we typically do, infrastructure, the capacity manager, the trains, or the booking, let's look at them from an integral perspective. Because at the end of the day, if we want to take that train and we want to buy that ticket, you use the whole of the system, not just one layer of it. So that's where our analysis started with the 4-layer model with the mobility system at first, from the top, where
so we're going to talk to it from the top to the bottom. And in the bottom, we see the infrastructure. That's often the first comment, right? Yeah. We want to improve international rail. Oh, well, tracks are not the same. Safety systems are different. You know, it's never going to work. We need more infrastructure. First response.
Yeah, I think if you look at any time the parliaments would spend on international rail, probably 95% will be spent on infrastructure.
Exactly.
That's the focus.
And now we're going to learn it's a broader scope. Talk us through the model.
Yeah, and we start at the top for a reason. Because if you and I would go to Paris now, we would actually want to buy a ticket first. Yeah. Right? So that's the top layer. It's a mobility system that allows you to procure tickets, to find information on the trains, where they go. And that's a layer which we think, also looking at the barriers, compared to its competitors, really could use some improvement.
What are some of the key problems in this layer of the system?
Well, if you look at the way you can buy airline tickets these days, I mean, if 40 years ago you had to go to a desk and buy a KLM ticket and that was it. Mm-hmm. But today you can go to 24 sites and they connect KLM with any other airlines, stitch it together for you, and that ticket is on your phone in a second. Yeah. I think for rail we still have a ways to go. Okay. And the integration between the different reservation systems, between the German, the French, Dutch. There is room for improvement on that focus for how can we make this an attractive product for consumers. Yeah,
and what I like about this model is that we can always keep in mind we can already start to improve the system on this level before we start that discussion about infrastructure, right? And I think that's true for every layer that we're going to touch on now.
Especially because of the time. I mean, I think there's an urgency. The timing is now. The problem is if infrastructure would be the only thing you could do to improve, we'd be waiting for the results for another 25 years.
Exactly.
Because of planning procedures and all the complexity that comes with it. Yeah. The top layers are things that we can do relatively quickly.
Beautiful. What is the second layer in the system?
The second layer is where the transport services are coming in. The one that we recognize as the trains that take us to these wonderful destinations. I think the key here is that all the operators that we typically use today also run national trains. And if in that one boardroom they have to decide between the international train and the national train, I think the pressure on the national train and the priority of such is always prevailing.
Yeah, and because it's so much bigger part of the daily operations, of the investments, of this, everything is bigger in national operations, right?
Yeah, and also politically, it's better organized. I mean, the mayors know very well that if you want to get a stop out of a very important city, they will call Parliament many more times than any international body would do to prevent that kind of important role to be played.
Yeah, when we spoke each other earlier about this, you said international rail travel doesn't have a voice in the boardroom.
Exactly. Well, and it does, of course, but if you look at it comparatively speaking to the national voice, national tends to prevail.
Okay, so we need to raise the volume of international rail travel in the boardroom.
Fine.
That's what we do on this level.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. What is in the next level?
Next level is, and this is where all the technical complexity comes in. How do we manage the capacity of the infrastructure together? This is where safety systems comes in. This is where traffic control comes in. And this is a crucial layer. And this is also a layer that is promising because new technologies allow us to make better use of infrastructure. And this is also a layer where things sometimes can be done faster. It's sometimes as simple as making sure that different capacity track and path are aligned between different countries. And you could have the most beautiful infrastructure, but if those paths are not aligned because of national differences, trains have to be waiting at stations before they can move on, which, like in a money term, is a waste of a lot of money.
Yeah.
So this is the area, I think, where coordination between the different countries can really make a difference.
All right. And we have one layer left, and we're at the bottom, the infrastructure, because it's not as if we cannot improve on that level, but it's the fourth level.
Yeah, and I think it's the fourth level, and I think the premise of our letter is that if you improve infrastructure, do it in the context of the 4 layers we just discussed. So it as an integral part, and not only infrastructure, but if you do infrastructure, make sure you have the path available, you have the transit operators that are going to drive great trains on it, and the ticketing systems are available and are open. And secondly, focus on the kind of like, from the Netherlands, from the Dutch perspective, what are the key things that really make that difference? Because if we're going to improve something on this end, make sure it's part of an integrated corridor approach and it doesn't stop on the other side of the border.
Exactly. Corridor is the key word. We're soon going to learn more about that. Now, what really seems to be kind of a trend break in the way this report and the letter focuses is that key starting point from the passenger.
Yep.
I want to know more about why that is. But to kind of get us out of The Hague and put us at the heart of where the passenger is, we met up last week at one of the busiest stations in Amsterdam, where I asked you the same question.
Hello and welcome to Amsterdam, the hustle and bustle of the South Station. Big offices, lots of people using transit to go in and about, to go nationally, go internationally. And the infrastructure is there. We got a train station connecting with most Dutch train stations around the country. We have a new subway line connecting this station with most places in Amsterdam. And we're standing above a bike parking, which is the most advanced with different lights for available slots for your bike. So the infrastructure is there, and it's going to get even better. As you can see on the board, improvements are underway, and the station will be even more accessible for international rail travel. So within 6 minutes, we are at Schiphol Station. Within 10 minutes in downtown Amsterdam. So what do we do with all that infrastructure that is available for us? How can we make sure that all that infrastructure is also being available to us, the passenger that wants to travel internationally? And I think that's where the report really zooms in on the passenger-first approach. Because the passenger-first approach doesn't start with all the infrastructure. It actually starts with looking for a ride, looking for a ticket. And how does it start these days? Well, it starts with a simple use of the phone. If I put in Amsterdam-London, I will find 7 easy hits that give me 24 flights a day straight from Schiphol Airport to London. If I want to look for rail, I have to scroll down and down and down. It doesn't even show up. I have to put in Amsterdam to London by rail. And if I do this with Bordeaux, same thing, but then even worse. There are only flights available. Not even rail options show up in the first 20 hits. So what is it that these trains and the options that are out there are not available enough? is because the data is not being shared. The data is not available to all those sites which are so good at making sure they're at the top of the list when somebody searches for that destination. And second, if we then look at booking, if you want to book those tickets, if I want to go to Bordeaux and I want to use the plane, there are 20 sites available that stitch the different airlines together and a seamless effort to me. It combines Air France with the Hopi or KLM with any other airlines. And I can also go to Air France or KLM, but I could also do it with these other sites that stitch the different operators together and let me pick the seat that I would like to have. Because all the data is available to those sites to do this and make it available to all passengers. And thirdly, train has this great advantage because it actually goes from city center to city center. It goes to Gare du Nord, it goes to Amsterdam Central, or in the future to this one. But people don't travel from station to station. People travel from door to door. So how about the integration with the bike share, with the taxis, with the other operators around in the city? Making sure it's a truly integrated experience, we need to make sure that these tickets and these options are available in a seamless manner. That's why the report recommends that on a European scale, the data for planning, the data for booking is available to all without any restrictions, making sure that these options can be provided to customers in the most friendly manner so that we can all use this amazing infrastructure, the amazing options that rail provides in a customer-friendly way. Back to The Hague.
Back to The Hague. Jeroen Kok speaking to Jeroen Kok. Well, obviously there was a tiny difference here. But you made it really clear why it's so important to start with that passenger first. And it seems that, especially in international rail, that can really be improved. We have moved from our chairs to our desk. We are now joined by Wijnand Veneman, Associate Professor at the TU Delft and Committee Member of the Dutch Council for Environment and Infrastructure. In a moment, we're going to learn from you about this corridor approach, which is so central in the advice and in the letter. But first, I want to quickly go to a first audience question. As I just explained, we're live, it's interactive. And we were talking about the four-layered model. And Jeroen Wolf, the Manager Business Development of NS, how do you translate that?
Dutch Railways.
The Dutch Railways International. He says, good morning, everybody. Well, good morning, Jeroen. How do you reflect on the policy barrier that is not yet part of the four-layer model, in which local, regional, national, and supernatural interests and policies do not always align and can negatively impact on the progress? He says, where's policy in this?
That's a very good question. And I think policy is about stitching the layers together. But we've taken that view from the passenger first. And the passenger or the traveler never calls the ministry to take a train, right? So we really try to drill down the focus, like what do I need as a passenger to use international rail?
Yeah.
But Jeroen, what's in the name, is right that like the policy challenge then internationally is to stitch it together and also to overcome the barriers he addresses.
Exactly, because the passengers are going to call Jeroen and his colleagues at the Dutch Railways. But this is exactly the purpose of this online event. That's why we try to bring people like yourself, Jeroen, but also all the European policymakers and policymakers across Europe together to really understand what is needed to improve these services so that operators like the Dutch Railways can further improve their service. Now, Wijnand, we understand from the report and from the letter that a key element in that improvement is the corridor approach. Mm-hmm. Let's clarify what the Council means with that. Can you explain?
Yes. So the idea is that on regional and national level, there are clear authorities that on the governmental side, they say, okay, these are the train services we want in this country, in this region, these are important. On a European level, the European Commission mostly goes for an open access kind of approach where eventually operators can deliver services there and they should be provided with capacity on the tracks. But what we see there, that has been tried for quite some time now. and it's not developing quickly enough, especially with the needs that we have right now. So this is why we see that a strong role for government in providing, using public service obligations to really think about Europe, the cities that are there that need to be connected, and then think about the services that we need there to really get this jump-started, the whole international rail services jump-started.
Can we unravel that a bit? You say there's a role for governments.
Yep.
Which governments are you looking at? National, regional, the European government?
So here we are looking at the European government. Yeah, so
Exactly.
we have a Dutch national government that looks at how we want the Dutch cities to be connected. We have an Irish, a Spanish, we have that everywhere. But now basically we need, on a European level, the same kind of thinking. What kind of services do we really need between which cities?
Yeah,
So-
and you refer to a public service obligation. For our viewers who might be not as deep into the rail policy work, what do you mean with that?
Okay, that's the way that European regulation structures the way in which governments can provide, can ask operators to deliver specific services.
Okay.
And it really regulates it quite strictly in terms of you deliver what and what can I pay for that. It's a kind of regulation to make that market work in a specific way.
Yeah, and in the letter, and again, if you joined later, this letter is also easy downloadable on the right side of your screen right now. You quite granularly explain how you would like that public service obligation to look like, right? The key performance indicators and the assets
Yes.
it should have. Yeah.
So we try to give some ideas on how you could develop that, but it's a far more specific kind of idea of how to develop those services than we have right now in terms of an open access kind of approach. So that is where we really want the European Union to put a step up. However, the thing is that if you do that, that's a thing that has to develop for quite some time. Yes, it's a view for the more distant future. And also, it's rather complicated. How are you going to do that? And so this is where we came up with that. We need something more urgently. We need something closer by, more something that can help us now. And this is where we said, okay, we need something like that in terms of a launching customer, a government that says these are really the connections that we need to develop. And we need that earlier than that European kind of covering transport authority that uses the PSO to develop that. And this is where we came up with this corridor approach. It's used in different kind of environments.
I think you brought a map, right? A map of Europe.
Yes.
Where we see all the corridors. It's on the next slide.
It's a kind of a Dutch-centric map because it starts at, but it's pretty straightforward in terms of what cities are there. You could extend it when you really take a European approach to Spain and more to the eastern side of Europe. But this starts at the Netherlands, and then basically having a limited set of routes of links provides this first backbone. And you have to consider that, obviously, in those countries, in France, in Germany, in England, there are existing networks that connect up to that. Yeah? So we don't have to develop all services. It's just that linking up, and that you can do through these corridors. So you limit it in terms of transport complexity. It makes it simpler. You limit it in terms of governance complexity. It's 2 or 3 countries working together. And then suddenly, the whole approach in terms of setting up a clear idea of what services you want on an international level, develop those, use PSOs to get them into the market.
PSOs, I'm really picky on abbreviations. So the public service
obligations
yes,
there, using those to get these services to the market, and then basically developing that market. So in the further future, it can have it can more stand on its own legs. That's the idea, limiting complexity there, and from that basis. Have this backbone run great services, linking up to local and regional and national services, and by that providing this flächendeckendes, that's the way that the Germans say, Europe covering network of rail services, public transport services, competing with other types of transport.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word, and this must sound like music in your ears, Jeroen, launching customer. So again, in public policy making a rail operation is an interesting term. Can you elaborate a little bit further on what it would take? Say we take a route and we turn that into a corridor, because in the letter it's pretty well defined what it requires from an organizational point of standpoint.
Yeah, so the idea is when you take a corridor like that, it's really What we now have is that it's linking national services together, yes? And we need to get away from that. Someone needs to take this international focus on what kind of service level you need on an international level, take that approach and then define the services on that international level. That means that probably less stops, other kinds of service levels, and then define that service, ask operators to deliver that service on that level, on that route. And also you're a launching customer now to the national rail network managers, because you're now saying, look, I have this train, I want this service to be delivered. Please fit it into your network as a governmental customer rather than one of the operators that might want some train slots somewhere through the network. Yes, it's a different kind of conversation that now occurs. It is the governments of these countries talking to the local national network manager saying, give me those slots for those trains. And then the chances of that train really being international services, delivering quality to the passengers there, we think it's much higher.
Exactly. And I read in the letter that you recommend there will be two governing bodies. There's a steering board of the governments connecting, driven by the EU, and then there's an operational board that has to deal with the coordination.
Yeah, so you need some, generally that is the way that you do it. You need some coordination where people are hands-on, looking at the problems that need to be served, where the coordination needs to be hands-on. And obviously there are problems occurring on a higher level where you are now talking to governments at the same kind of level, where someone every now and again has to cut through the slack and move forward.
Let me quickly use a question from Manfred Treber. He's with us. Good morning, Manfred. He says, well, a big problem for Germany is that the government is very hesitant to these PSOs, the public service obligations for long-distance trains. How can we get around that? The Germans don't want it.
No. In Germany, currently, there's an open access market on the Fernverkehr, the long distance trains. So they have that already. That's a choice that where the policy was made in Germany to do that, and it worked fine with DB being a strong candidate in that, a strong provider in that market, and already developing the services there. That is the problem on an international level. We don't have a strong deliverer of those services that has developed already in the market, that just people trust, where people can go to. So that is what's lacking. So there is a clear distance between this situation in Germany, where DB is providing those services with some small competitors pushing them along. We don't have that on an international level. So this is where I think the situation is different. And if you, well, we hopefully can explain that to the German government.
Problem is like, okay, but you want to have European public service obligation, but the Germans are hesitant. So how? Well, you say let's start with another launching customer then.
No, so the idea is that the open access approach, the Fernverkehr approach in Germany works fine given the market situation there. We tried it on an international level. It doesn't work fine. So this simple kind of argumentation that locally governments are in control, and the more international you get, the more you can leave it to the free market, that has been tried and tested, and it's a wrong kind of argumentation. On an international level, we see that we need that market developed. We need a launching customer. That customer can be those corridor coordinators, and that can develop those markets.
It seems that Kai Mook, or Mook in English, from Berenschot, is disagreeing a bit with that last comment. He writes, open access has not really been tried in Europe yet. Isn't it a little bit too early to already replace a non-trusted model with a new one? And what I actually want to ask you, well, you can reply to Kai, but also take it in a bit broader perspective. Where does the open access, you mentioned it at Amsterdam Zuid as well, stand in relation to this idea about the corridors?
Yes, when you look at Tally's kind of approaches, that originally wasn't open access, but open access has been there for quite some time. We expect services there to develop. It's not developing, and there is an urgency there. I think that for the long run, when that market has been developed, it might very well be that we say, okay, we loosen our governmental control or focus of that market, because now the market is mature, developed. It has been. It's now clear that it can work on its own, and then you could go to open access again. But that's something that currently isn't working, and that is not in line with the urgency that we have for this. So this is where we don't see this development of corridor coordination by governments currently as the end stage.
Exactly.
That
this
is
kind of a
something
Kickstarter.
where it needs this little bump to get going. But obviously, for the longer term, when the market is mature and we can leave it on its own, please do so.
Okay. Thank you for this explanation. If you have any more questions, the good news is Wijnand Veneman is staying with us throughout the entire broadcast. In the last part of the program, we have about 30 minutes for open panel discussion, Q&As with everybody involved. So keep sending in your questions, or give the questions that you really like to see covered a thumbs up, so they are promoted to the top of the list. Thank you for now, Wijnand.
Yeah.
All right, Jeroen Kok, the Dutch Council published its report independently, and asked advice by the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. At the same time, earlier this year, our Secretary of State also published a position paper. What is the relation between those two elements?
No, I think they, we always ask, like, okay, is it like in line with? But I think the two initiatives came about separately. And I think we focus very much on the like what Wijnand was just talking about, that corridor management, how to implement it. I think the initiative by the ministry fits very nicely into a call for that cooperation. But I think the challenge is going to be, how can we make that call for cooperation specific and actually happening?
Exactly.
So I think that's where the two initiatives could complement each other quite nicely.
Interesting. Let's find out a little bit more about this initiative and the position paper by a representative of the Dutch Ministry for Infrastructure and Water Management. Hinne Groot is joining us virtually this morning. Hinne, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for being able to join your interesting conference.
Yes, yes. Well, we'd love to learn a little bit more about this initiative of our Secretary of State. Let's start with why. Why did State Secretary Stientje van Veldhoven publish a position paper on international rail passenger transport?
He published this report because it is time to do so, because we are in a situation where we have to make transport more climate friendly, and international rail is particularly beneficial to making transport more climate friendly. In addition, we see that this is an area where the market is not performing so well as we would like to, where you see on comparable distances, domestic or international, the service level on international field is much, much lower. So why is that? And we would like to raise this issue on the European agenda, and the time is now, because at the European level, the thinking is about what should be the follow-up of the Green Deal, what should be the priorities for the European budget, and that's why the State Secretary, I think, decided to launch these ideas early this year.
Well, thank you. We saw in that position paper that it also really starts with this corridor approach, as Wijnand also mentioned. And there was a real focus on a consistent network of connecting European cities. Why is first connecting the big cities so important in her view?
Well, the connecting big cities is in fact just a way to reflect, of course, the transport flows. We believe that the bigger transport flows are between bigger cities, capitals, as you like, and also airports, and connecting those. That we should, as member states together, make sure that there is sufficient service level related to our policies. And if you now see, those service levels are internationally much lower. If I go from Amsterdam to Maastricht, I have much better service level in terms of frequencies than compared to if I want to go from Amsterdam to Düsseldorf or Cologne. And why is that? If we are talking about comparable sizes of cities,
Yeah.
So we look at transport flows, and there should be a task of member states to make sure that the market can really do its work here.
Exactly. Now, what was noticeable is that this position paper that was published in February this year was relatively quickly followed by a political statement from the same Secretary of State. What was this political statement about?
What the intention was of the position paper already to work together at European level. We recognize that improving international rail passenger transport is a matter of working together as countries, member states, and infrastructure managers and all the players, but it also deserves a place on the European agenda. European agenda means regulatory framework, innovation priorities, resources, perhaps. And to reflect that, we have to work at both levels, both between member states and at European level. The intention was to develop a political statement. I think the statement is really reflecting this purpose to highlight the importance to put this on the European agenda, plus to work together as member states on the issue. So not only asking, but also working together.
Mm-hmm. And what can you already say about the first reactions of other member states to this idea when it was presented to them?
We had positive reactions from our colleagues of member states. Many recognized, I think, the problems of developing international passenger services. To develop new services is giving much more work in the government offices than developing national services. Work has to be done on interoperability, infrastructure, capacity allocation, and so on. So many recognize this issue, but also recognize that it is the time to address it now. And that so we got a lot of support from the start on, and we are having of course discussions with our at our expert level with other ministries, and so in the month of April and May we had good discussions, and the idea was well supported that we should work together on that and to develop a European a more profound European agenda, and therefore to include also the European institutions as much as possible, Commission, Railway Agency, Shift to Rail, OTIF, etc. That to do that from the start on, that was recognized by everybody.
Right, so you can report that there seems to be quite some momentum on the political level. Let's look a little bit more at the how also. In the political statement, the signatories decided to establish a platform. Well, if there's a word that can mean anything, what is a platform? Can you a little bit explain what they were thinking about when they referred to this?
Platform is meant as an expression of cooperation between member states, but also an expression to cooperate with the European institutions. It's not a formal European Union institution, clear enough, but we recognize really the cooperation. So what's now being done, we are setting up the platform with our member states colleagues, and that we try to define what should be the first priorities of the platform in terms of results, in terms of international agenda. And in addition, the platform can, from our point of view, only work if we found, let's say, also our colleagues from the sector side working together in this direction. So we want to agree with them the best agenda. Right. And what is more, the platform can also be useful as a continuous political momentum where we also try to work very closely together with all the EU presidencies, because they have really also the competence to bring it at a higher political level from time to time.
Yeah, so it's a place where this momentum can establish, can find a process, can keep progressing. What do you see as some of the first steps aimed at the cooperation in the platform?
Well, the first steps should be to identify our first priorities. So that could be what are really the issues to improve passenger information and passenger booking systems. What is really the European agenda behind that? We know there are already actions, but how can we really accelerate that? That could be, I think, that is widely shared. I think another one which could be on the platform is indeed what are the framework conditions to develop night trains in Europe. That is also widely shared. And that can come from different perspectives. Are there barriers to the rolling stock market, or are there labor laws barriers, or whatever? We can address that. And also the how to use the public service contracts instrument cross-border. That was also raised by a considerable number of colleagues as an important issue. This does not need to be the solution per se, but at least people say it is a very important question. How can we accelerate developments in international rail?
All right.
So we will define in our platform the priorities, and we try to deliver this within also the time frame of the year of rail, which we expect next year.
All right. Well, thank you for elaborating on this, Hinne Groot from the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. We'll take your words and message, and we'll reflect on that together with us here in the studio and our viewers. Thank you for now, and thank you for your time being with us.
Thanks a lot.
So, Jeroen Wijnand, I also raised this question with our audience right now via the poll, but let me start with you. What words come to mind when you listen to this initiative by the ministry?
No, I think it's clearly this momentum. It's happening. People are discussing it, but I'm going to get going. Let's do something, right? I mean, there's still trains waiting for 10 minutes on stations, international trains that cannot go through because the paths are not aligned.
Exactly.
And so, let's get to work.
It's interesting. Some of our first responses we get from you as a viewer is indeed progress on paper, more urgency needed. On the other side, okay, willingness, but modest. Some people say agenda setting starting up, so hurry up, someone writes. So there needs to be more momentum. No. This is live from our audience. Wijnand, what comes to mind when you listen to this?
So I see that there's on a European level the slow progress, and people see that it's needed to be done. So I think that partly that's where that corridor approach comes in slicing and dicing that. So you need that platform, yes, that's clear. But at the same time, there are things that you can do right now when you can start off with to, on specific links and routes, develop international services swiftly.
Yeah, so we should be working on parallel tracks. Pun intended.
Yeah. Pun intended, I guess.
Yes, okay. Well, with that, let's go further through Europe. When we started, Jeroen, we briefly touched on that ambition in the Green Deal. Europe as a climate-neutral continent in 2050. Well, we're very honored that this morning we are also joined live by Daniel Mes. He's a member of the cabinet of Frans Timmermans of the European Commission, obviously who is pulling the Green Deal. And Daniel, we would love to learn a little bit more about you, how this rail transport and this momentum and this ambition that we're talking about this morning fits in the ambitions of the Green Deal. Daniel, good morning.
Morning, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well. Glad that you're with us this morning. Making the transport sector more sustainable through decarbonization is an important element in the policy we can all read. Huh? Can you highlight and specify a bit the importance of rail in the context of the Green Deal?
I'm actually honored to be here because I saw that report that we're discussing, and I'm an admirer and bewonderaar of this work. Rail is absolutely crucial for the European Green Deal. I also like the fact that you saw from the audience that people feel some kind of almost impatience to get this done, and we share that. Of course, you need to do it right. It always takes time to do things in the rail sector, but we share the ambition. Rail is crucial for the European Green Deal because it's a climate-friendly way of transport, but also in times where, let's face it, post-corona, we have to rethink the way that we move around, and the transport sector, we need to rethink how to do things. So this also ties really to that bigger discussion. Rail is a safe way to travel. It's a sustainable way to travel. It's a way to travel where you can actually do something else while you're traveling. You can work as a young student. You can look at your landscape and be excited about the city that you can visit. I'm now a father of 3 kids, and I can play I Spy with my little eye to entertain them, and have hopefully a Wi-Fi connection for Netflix, and my kids can move around a while. And Rail has all of that. And then it makes you wonder, and you have to scratch yourself behind the head, also working for a politician like Frans Timmermans, but why don't we see that that's then growing by itself, passenger traffic? So this report asks exactly the right question, and also makes a key point. I truly believe that, Europe is used to doing things like let's invest, let's take away barriers, and let's do operational standards. I think that this mandate in the Commission should be the mandate where we put indeed the passenger and what the passenger needs for better connections, better comfort, really give it the place that it deserves in the agenda.
Exactly. And if we dive one layer deeper, so we share the ambition and then we're supporting in the momentum, are there any specific proposals within the Green Deal that have an effect on the international passenger rail sector?
Because the Green Deal is, of course, about how do we also stimulate a climate-friendly way of travel, and rail is key in that. What I like also is the practical way to go about things. That the Green Deal is supposed to be about making these connections. So I like this thinking about let's just get together, bang heads together, and see how can I do better planning together with other people? How can I adjust my timetables? How can I not immediately invest in high-speed networks, but how can I upgrade stuff that we have and make sure that trains can drive quicker and get to their destination? That absolutely fits with the European Green Deal. It was not perhaps mentioned explicitly in the European Green Deal as we announced it in December 2019, but I can tell you right now that there will be follow-up in 2021 on exactly this issue, the passenger traffic. We're really committed to that, and it will also come back in the mobility strategy that, our plans for the mobility sector.
So Daniel, you're now feeding our news hunger, right? So it's almost 2021. Can you already kind of show us a slip of what we can expect then at that point, specifically for international passenger rail?
It's just interesting to see about all the things that are already being set in motion. I think that we should be a bit more optimistic about all of this when you see that we now have the reports, and parallel we indeed have ministers that sign political declarations that they want a comprehensive action plan for passenger rail, and that political declaration was a big success for Ms. van Veldhoven. It was signed by all the member states that actually have a rail network, so it's unanimous. That work will now start, and I believe that work should really be about, practical things. How do we improve the rail passenger traffic, and then feeding into follow-up by us. I leave it also to other people on the call, because we also have the magnificent Elisabeth Werner on the call who can talk about all of this, which is also involved in that. But the point that I want to make is that we're really also really on that. I think that if you look at, we've done massive investment in the rail sector in the past 20 years, 400 billion euros, if you look at it in total. We've done our job at taking away barriers. We've done our job in seeking some kind of harmonization. I really think that ticketing, making it easier to book an international rail journey, something needs to be done by that. We cannot look away anymore from that. And that is something that I think we really should insist upon, and that will be a key focus, at least from my side. And
interesting. Yeah. Enough said. We read about between the lines, Daniel. Jeroen, you want to comment? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Daniel, thanks. And in line with that, this report was, we started this pre-COVID. Mm-hmm. So then, of course, something happens and everybody starts asking, okay, is this still relevant? Mm-hmm. And I think Daniel was already noting that, especially now, there needs to be this focus on international rail. And as an optimist as I am, this is also the great opportunity, because we all need to figure it out again. There is no self-generating solution. So my question to Daniel is, are there initiatives within the European Green Deal context that actually look at this kind of opportunity, so to speak, of how can we really address these key issues for international rail, specifically because of the times we're in?
As you remember, like we were all like on rail freight already talking about, like, you know, how can we improve the functioning of international rail freight and corridors. Now the passenger dimension is coming in. This is really all about, you know, a model shift. My boss also said it yesterday at the press conference when he announced the climate target plan for 2030, so the new ambitions on climate, and he explicitly said, you know, we're also facing times where, and that's just a reality. Okay, aviation plays a role in our mix. We cannot do without aviation either. But the aviation sector will need to become leaner and reshape itself. And we need to then talk about like what that means for rail. You see that in countries like Austria and Switzerland, there are cooperation between airlines and train operators selling tickets on each other's networks. That is a magnificent thing. And again, I'm really, really attached also in the context of the Green Deal of delivering for citizens in climate-friendly travel. And that booking is very important to me. I tested it actually myself on 2 of the routes that were mentioned in your report. I said, okay, imagine I want to travel from Assen to Paris, which is one of the routes where we see, you know, rather than taking a plane, let's see, well, I can't do that from Assen, but let's see a bit like whether I can take the train. And that worked pretty well, actually. So I went on TrainLink. It's like, there's like one connection in Rotterdam. Let's do that. But then when I tried the other route that was mentioned by Wijnand in his network, one of them, between Amsterdam and Prague, well, it looked very different when I got there. It was sort of like please travel to Hilversum, to Hengelo, to Bad Bentheim in Germany, and then go on. And, you know, let's face it, you know, I'm not a young student anymore. I mean, I'm a father of 3 dads. When I look at that, I'm sort of like, okay, I need to have my buggy and my diapers, and I need to make sure that my kids stay on the platform. For me, that's a horror scenario to switch 5 times, not knowing whether I have rights as a passenger for the right connections, and you know something needs to be done there. And I have the feeling that if indeed, as you know, when you look at issues, you know, what would happen if there would be more data available, would that picture look different if I were to book that? Because boosting a transport mode should not be something that only exists on paper. It should be something that we do in a practical way, and for the passenger.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing. And I think it's very true for this topic that we discussed today. Yes, on the one hand, we're talking about European governments working together in platforms that sound like they don't go quick enough. On the other hand, then you pointed out very well that is actually signed by everyone unanimously. So there is a lot of momentum. And at the same time, on a very practical level, most of us are train travelers, and most of us every now and then have the chance, do I go Amsterdam, Vienna by train or plane? And unfortunately, the train is not always yet competitive. So, Daniel, thank you for your first comments. Stay with us, because at the end, the last half hour of this program, we will have an interactive panel debate with input from our viewers and also from the other speakers in the call. So stay tuned. Thank you for now. Then we quickly move around in Europe, and I'd like to introduce the Executive Director of the European Rail Infrastructure Managers, the EIM. Monica Heiming is with us. Monica, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you here on the screen. Well, you represent that bottom layer of the model that Jeroen introduced, the infrastructure. I guess we can only assume that stimulating international rail travel is something you really endorse, right?
Of course, more traffic, more income. So, and that's very, very simple. Yeah. Now, actually, we highly support the RLI initiative. It's easier to push it on paper than in reality, because what we see now is that international passenger traffic will naturally hit the same rocks or have to jump over the same obstacles as international rail freight. So that's an issue.
Yeah, and how does this proposal of the RLI about this corridor approach fit in with your own view of the sector? Does this land well within the infrastructural layer?
Well, we are not, I mean, we really support corridors. Corridors are still somehow a bit of a young breed. So we have still a bit of a, how to say, rodage to be done. We have a bit more senior corridors, we have more junior corridors, and it's interesting to see that the corridors at least respect the same base principles, but that still this innovation between the corridors can still take place. So we will never have the same approach to 100% between the different corridors. Mm-hmm. The corridors is a good thing if you have a lot of infrastructure. And in some countries, that's a little bit an issue. Either you extend the country or you go over or under the existing one. So in some countries which are a bit more crowded, like in the Netherlands, that will be a bit tricky because I think it's over time a bit crowded in terms of capacity. So this is where actually we need, if you want to have an international corridor for passenger, great. Then we need to look into how we make this with, how do we realize this with existing capacity on the track.
Yeah, because can you elaborate on what it means for your members if we really start to implement these kind of corridors? Where does the friction start?
Oh, the friction is between, of course, we have national specificities. So like the same we have in rail freight. That's normal. I mean, we come out of more than 100 years of national thinking and actually the agency, the railway agency, which we like quite a lot, is also a bit challenger of infrastructure managers. And Joseph Doppelbauer loves rail infrastructure managers just for that point of for that aspect. Okay, I like you too. So we need, I mean, if we need to come along, but to give up national or regional or company rules, it's to explain this to a railway engineer is a big challenge. But we are working on that. So we have the issue log. It's not that we're not doing anything and just waiting that suddenly a rock is hitting our head. So rail infrastructure managers are, let's say, the hen and the egg. So we are the egg. And if you don't have rail infrastructure cooperating more in a more harmonized way, we're fully aware of that, you don't have any international train traffic, whatever it is, freight or passenger. We're aware of that.
Mm-hmm. So
for some to resume, for some it's more an opportunity, for others it's a bit more a challenge, but we are getting there.
Okay. We're getting there, yet at the same time, that's kind of the forbidden word in this context today, because we want to speed, there's urgency. What, in your view, is key for a successful implementation of this concept?
I think it's what we have seen in the past, let's say 10, 15 years, is a lot of regularity changes or legal changes. So we're now in the fourth driver package. I sometimes joke that we are heading for the fifth. I think so. But so it's a lot of changes introduced in a short period of time for railways. For other sectors would be normal. For railways is a bit of a challenge. And also to find the role between the national interest, and you raised it this morning, this is where you have to square the circle somehow. So the RLI approach, when I looked at the report, is quite interesting. So how much of a benefit do you create with an international, the cross-border section, which you're opening up? So it's not only in one country, but also in another country, and could be also in subsequent countries. So you have to create, of course, a market, and we are welcoming the approach, and we would like to be part of it. We need to be part of it. Without infrastructure, nothing is working. But of course, we need to, let's say, look also at operational procedures, and this is very, very complex. So we need to have a harmonized approach, both between all the infrastructure managers, but also vis-a-vis the railway undertakings, because their non-interoperability is the same issue.
Mm-hmm. Jeroen, you would like to add or question?
I think that's a great point. And I think one of the things we looked into on that operational side, we found, and we were told by some of the infrastructure managers, that there's so much regulation between, for example, drivers that have to speak all the languages of the countries that you go through, or you cannot agree with one language, for example. Just interesting, very typical operational things. So my question would be, Monica, what kind of low-hanging fruit would you see if we would take a corridor that you think are like immediate things that we can look into and that improve certain and take away some barriers?
I think the key is traffic control management or the traffic control centers. And we have already, this is a low-hanging fruit because following Rastatt, so we managed to turn Rastatt into an opportunity a few years ago. We have the International Contingency Management Plan, which was somehow for us, let's say, almost like a little man landing on the moon. For others, was a big man landing on the moon, but we have that, and there is a much more exchange now, and I've seen from also from our members that they apply this here and there. So there's a stronger exchange between the different operational staff, between the infrastructure managers. Now you can say, Monica, we don't see for you it's a revolutionary act, but for us we don't see that much. Yeah. But it's in its infancy. It's in a nutshell. But we also see, as I stated earlier, the issue log, and we also see the agency working on more recommendations on how could you do best, also related to within the scope of COVID, for example, give us a bit of a challenge and a proposal how we could do better and how we can align things. And for me, actually, the low-hanging fruit would also be digitalization. If you look at the hardcore old-fashioned assets, that will take you ages, century. I will not be here, you neither, before that changes. But digitalization helps us to overcome all this and to have much more exchange on data. And that is really, for me, a low-hanging fruit.
Thank you for your very interesting comments and reflections, Monica. Stay with us to the end where we have the full-on interactive panel with all of us. If you're joining us later, you have a question or a comment based on anything you've just heard, use the Slido application to send it to the studio or give a thumbs up to a comment that you want to really promote to the top of the list. Thank you for now, Monica. We're heading over to the Executive Director of the Community of European Railway and Infrastructure Companies, Libor Lochman. Libor, good morning. I think you quickly need to hit the unmute button. That's why we always do the good morning. So we have this in the good morning. We could see you said good morning, and now we can also hear you.
Me now?
Yes, definitely. Good morning. Glad you're joining us. Your members are representing 92% of the passenger rail operations in Europe. So definitely you represent basically all the players in this field. Let's validate first quickly our ambition. Are you also aligned with that stimulating European or international passenger rail is really beneficial and that we should all put our shoulders to that? Hold on.
This is also in the heart of the...
Yeah, sorry, we missed the first part of your sentence. Could you
I said that definitely yes, because otherwise I today if one of the promoters...
Libor, I need to interrupt you. I think we have a technical issue. Are you running the live stream in parallel somewhere on your computer? Because we hear an echo and that cancels out on the Zoom, I think. That's why your sentences get
I'm not connected with anything.
I'm looking at our technicians to see if we can fix you up.
I'm connected with...
Okay. Yeah? Let's try again. So, stimulating international passenger rail travel.
Is it better now or is it the same?
Something's going wrong. What shall we do? I'm looking... Yeah. Shall we move first to Joseph and we see if we can get you on the phone line, Libor, and we have your...
Okay, I really don't know what's...
No, we'll fix that one-on-one. We'll quickly shift to Joseph. We'll come back to you, Libor, once we have you on the landline phone, and then we can hear you as well. Sorry for the inconvenience, and we'll get you back in a minute. Because then we move on to the next in our panel. Let's see, and let me allow our technical team to get that ready. Yes, we see Joseph Doppelbauer with us, Executive Director of the European Union Agency for Railways, the ERA. Good morning, Joseph.
Good morning, warm welcome from Valenciennes. I hope you can hear me well.
We can hear you well, we can see you very clear. We've also asked you to reflect on the letter and the report that the Dutch Council has presented. You prepared a few slides for us. Can you please talk us through?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank RLI for their excellent work, and I was in discussion with them before they have distributed the report. And also based on what Daniel and Monica have just mentioned, I believe the opportunity for rail has never been greater than now. We have the European Green Deal, which is, of course, a reaction to the global climate crisis. We also should not forget that we still have a problem with transport safety. We are in the automotive area killing around 26,000 people every year. And now we have an opportunity to really create an attractive European railway system. And the study that has been published by RLI is a main factor to accelerate the development in that direction. Now, what is important is to make it happen and how to finance the transition to a modern European railway system. I indeed see a number of low-hanging fruits. The first one is we need to push ahead with the digitalization, and first and foremost, this means accelerating the ERTMS rollout. I also see an opportunity now to renew drastically rolling stock and to provide funding. Someone has mentioned in this context that we could consider a scrap fund like was done a couple of years ago for the automotive industry. We also shouldn't forget the infrastructure funding. We should not forget that there are still some cross-border stretches that are not so well supported, and we need to provide the appropriate financing, perhaps by increasing co-financing. And Monica has already alluded to it. We need to strengthen the cross-border traffic and capacity management. Also, Jeroen has continuously used the example of a train waiting at the station because the train doesn't get the free signal. If we switch to the next slide, I have summarized here a number of strategic statements which should address some of the key issues that we have if we want to improve. And we should not only improve, we have to drastically improve the European railway system in order to make it competitive. So the first statement is that we should come to a situation where we have no longer any technical or operational barriers. You mentioned the languages between the different countries, but there is still a number of other technical barriers. Certainly on this aspect, the corridor approach will help drastically. Then we have to continue working on increasing the safety and the security, both for the users of the railway system and the workers. And COVID has shown that it is necessary that rail is agile in responding to emergency situation. This agility will also be necessary if we think of natural catastrophes that are more and more frequent now because of the climate change. Digitalization will enable to integrate rail as the backbone of the multimodal transport system, which should then make rail seamless. And again, from a customer perspective, this would mean that Daniel can buy a good ticket and a good connection from Hasselt to Prague. With all these factors, we will make rail increasingly competitive as a mode, as a sector, and competition. I also understand in that direction that we have competition in the sector in a kind of open access mode. And all of this will finally lead that rail is the favored mode of transport. We already see it with the young generation, with the flight shaming movement, but it needs a lot of work and a lot of initiative from all actors to make the vision a reality. If we go to the next slide, there I come back to the main approach that we should look at the problem from the passenger's perspective. And obviously, the passenger, when he decides which mode of transport he should take, he has a number of criteria. If you press one more on the next, then the animation should start, because now COVID has shown that there is absolute necessary condition, which is safety and security. So safety and security is the principal priority for passengers. If the passengers don't feel that the transport mode is safe and secure, they will decide for another option. Then there are, of course, the aspects that have to do with the value for money. It's the availability of a connection, and a connection that is feasible, not one where you have to change your train 5 times. Travel time and punctuality, the accessibility, the quality, and last but not least, the price. And here I have shown a comparison of prices between rail and flight. And unfortunately, there is still a very huge gap in the price levels between the low-cost airlines and the trains. All in all, it is the value for money, but it is also the dependability, meaning if trains are late and if trains are cancelled, then the quality does not meet the expectations of the customer. And should there be an emergency situation, and we hear it all the time from passenger surveys, accurate and immediate passenger information is enormously important in order to drive customer satisfaction. Now on that background, if we move to my final slide, I show you a number of actions which are also more or less in line with what has been proposed by RLI and which has also been mentioned in the document of the Dutch ministry. We need to develop the European high-speed network, and we need to possibly start by connecting the major cities in Europe. Another aspect that is important is to connect the railway network to the main airports. If you look into the top 10 connections in Europe that have the highest number of flight passengers, you see that in almost all cases, the respective airports are not well connected to the train network. In the Netherlands, Schiphol is of course directly connected with an airport, but for instance, in Germany, neither Berlin, nor Munich, nor Hamburg have a connection of the train network, of the high-level train network to the airport. The European network of night trains is also very important as a complementary offer to the daytime high-speed trains, but we still have a lot to work to eliminate inefficiencies on the railway network, both in the infrastructure, we have still some bottlenecks, but also in terms of operational procedures, having to change the local driver at the border because of language barriers. So this all lead to a strategy for the industrial policy for rail, because it needs to be a European approach, and we need to go away from the current approach that is focused on the respective national priorities. Finally, we believe, and it has been mentioned before, that capacity of the railway system and the traffic coordination needs to be managed at the European level, with a first step notably being the corridor management. And finally, all of this will not be possible without significant investment of railway project, perhaps with a better coordination of the various projects. So with all of this, I am a true believer that we can shape a future of railway transport to provide a safe, connected, and affordable railway system, which has a minimum environmental footprint and brings us towards a green Europe. So this is my views, which I believe are very well aligned with the study that we are discussing today.
Yes, thank you very much, Joseph Doppelbauer. And indeed, that was the key question. How do the views align? And it seems that they're very much aligned. Thank you for sharing the perspective of the ERA. And stay with us as well for the final panel debate. I'm going to move quickly back to Lieber Lochman, who is now joining us by the good old phone. Lieber, I hope we can hear you well now. Good morning once again. Yes, we're getting there. Sorry for the inconvenience, but that's why we also always have to have some plan Bs ready. Again, back to you.
So can you hear me now?
Yes. We hear you very well.
Perfect.
So we hear you, we see
Thank
you.
you very much.
We have created some complex puzzle of phone lines and imagery, and now you also prepared a few slides also to share your views and reflections on the proposed corridor approach and how that aligns with your perspective. So please take us through that.
Thank you very much. In fact, I will start from a slightly broader perspective. We can go straight to the next slide. I mean, that's what you have seen already on the screen before, so that we are representing, yes, as you said, the majority of the passenger operating companies. But since we are really the system, I would say, association representing the railway here in Brussels vis-à-vis the policymakers, we take care also of the freight operating companies and obviously the infrastructure as well. So we are whatever we do, we always have to see the system benefits at the first place as a priority. Now, from that sense, so I would not start talking purely about the corridors only. So we can switch to the next slide, please. Because for me, what is essentially is the complete single European railway area. And I know you mentioned that you like the abbreviation. So you have the first one here, the SERA or SERA, which is the single European railway area. And that's something which is embedded in the regulation. And it's something that if you wish to see any improvement of the rail sector in Europe, this is what has to deliver at the first place. Because then consequently, we will be able to offer the high quality customer-oriented services. What we need, however, is also the level playing field across all the transportation modes. And I will come back in my next slide as well, because we have to see the potential of the railway in the entire complexity. Of course, what we are going to do from our side, this is, the continuous effort of being the safest mode. And now, if I just link to what Joseph has said a few seconds ago, it's safety, but also in the future, we will have to take care of the health and safety due to the COVID infection or pandemic. We have to take care of the offers for all the passenger segments, including the high level of the automation and customer-oriented businesses to improve the customer experience. Also through the ticketing, I fully agree with that. What has been said in the previous by the previous speakers, we have to improve the services for the customers, starting from the ticketing one. We have an instrument for that, which is called the full service model. So you have yet another abbreviation here, but it is a special technical basis on which we can build our future communication with the customers efficiently. If you switch to the next one. This was the sector. Now I connect to what Daniel has been explaining. We have a huge expectation from the intention of the European Union to become the first zero economy by 2050. So really that the Green Deal is going to deliver. And the Green Deal can only deliver if the rail is going to play an essential role in that. Not only, of course, in the context of the international services, but in general. And where we have to improve all variety of the framework conditions that I said before. So we have to have essential conditions for improvement of the cross-border interoperability. And believe or not, even though that we mostly share the very same track gauge, we are still far from enjoying the same conditions on the various sides of the border. We have to improve also the multimodal connectivity. That's why the railroad connectivity is mentioned again. But now if we talk about the Green Deal and to make the rail attractive, that's what I said previously, we have to set also the conditions right across the modes. So the implementation of the polluter pay and user pay principles should help us to attract the customers to the rail services more nationally as well as internationally. What we have to do then on the side of the infrastructure is further improving the connectivity, electrifying the tracks, increasing the speed, digitalizing the railways, and also exploring the potential of how to attract the private investors into that. And last but not least, and this is what again needs to be well connected, not only through the Green Deal, but also the budget of the Union, is the funding for the research and innovation. We have to improve, we have to improve a lot, and we need to invest into the research innovation as well. So that will be about the Green Deal. Now, the next will be what we expect, and the next slide, please. So what we expect from another abbreviation, and I really try to meet expectation about having a lot of the abbreviations here, European Union Strategy for Smart and Sustainable Mobility. We have to start from the infrastructure. And this is not, this future strategy for the sustainable mobility that is going to be presented by the Commission end of the year, and I'm sure that Elisabeth Werner will tell us even more, is kind of the follow-up of the previous white papers. And the white paper said already, or the 10T regulation said that we need to have the high-speed core network. If you talk about the improvement of the international corridors for passenger services, it's not going to work with the high-speed network. So we need to have the completion of those essential infrastructures as quickly as possible. And of course, we have to eliminate the missing list and transport bottlenecks, because you will never have a good, attractive connections across the border if you still have the missing links as we have today. Plus, and that's again about the multimodal connectivity, we will not be able to serve the customers door to door without having perfect connections through the other alternative modes from our terminals and the stations. So the infrastructure. Of course, we do not stop at the infrastructure, so we move to the next slide, please. Because if we deal with infrastructure, we have a number of services, and your 4-layer model is in fact showing that very clearly, that we need to have the services on the train and with the train, and then also the auxiliary services on the passenger side. So if we achieve the infrastructure, or we reach the infrastructure that allow us to be competitive with regards to the speed and with regards to the quality of service for the distances up to 1,000 kilometers, so being competitive vis-a-vis the private cars, but mainly without the short-haul flights, we can be partially winning the case. Then, of course, we need to improve the ticketing, and we need to be also connected throughout the multimodal offers. So that's why the mobility as a service is going to play an essential role. And last but not least, if we talk about the cross-border international rail services, we definitely wish to be also fully accessible. So serving not only, I would say, the classic customers, but also the passengers with reduced mobility. So this is our challenge that is standing and ahead of us. And we believe that your concept of the corridors with our concept of what needs to be promoted through the new strategies and the commitment of the state and the companies can really be very productive. And if it is, and that will be my last slide in fact now, if it is like that, then we achieve our huge challenge. And the huge challenge is that to double the modal share of the passenger traffic to achieve the level of at least 15% by 2030 and 20% by 2050, in which obviously, again, the international passenger services must play an essential, crucial role. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to contribute. I believe that, again, your approach and the approach of the Dutch government or the Dutch Ministry for Transport and Water Management is perfectly aligned, and we have a lot to do together with the other member states and together with all the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Lieber Lochman, for your first reflections. We'll get back to you also during the panel debate. For the sake of time, we promised our viewers in the timetable below that would start at 11:30, but we will delay that a little bit because we haven't heard from our last panelist yet. So stay tuned, Lieber. I'd like to introduce our last panelist, who was already referenced by Daniel Mess, Elisabeth Werner, Director of Land Transport of the European Commission, Directorate General MOVE. Elisabeth, good morning.
Good morning. Good
yes.
morning. Thank you very much. It's a very lively event, and it was very interesting to listen. It's very timely also as we stand ahead of 2021, the European Year of Railways. And I think that's exactly the type of discussions and events that we would like to do for the next 12 months as well. Yeah. For the European Commission, cross-border rail is of course central. I mean, for us, the cross-border, the international aspect is our bread and butter. We want to have the free movement of people, the free movement of goods, and the free movement of services, meaning the same companies can provide everywhere in Europe. And with COVID and the Green Deal, there is a sense of urgency. There is a lot of impatience for rail to deliver. I can only agree with what Daniel has said. In the RLI report, what I was really focusing on is the 4 layers. And you presented the 4 layers again at the beginning. In my reflection, I wanted to look at those and see a bit also what Europe has done or where more should be done. You have the basic layer, the infrastructure layer, and we have the trans-European networks, our basic infrastructure layers in place for quite a while. I'll try to show you briefly what this looks like from our point of view, multicolored and very nicely linking main ports, main cities, and of course, essentially airports. We will
if you can just have a printout. Just Elizabeth, quick question. What do the different colors mean in this visual?
The different colors mean the different corridors that we have in place.
Okay.
All of these corridors are multimodal. Okay. So you'll find passenger rail on all of those. Many of it is actually high-speed rail. Yeah. I just wanted to show you this as a teaser because in the next months and certainly in the next year, we want to show a map when these connections, when this infrastructure is finally built by 2030, which is the deadline that was agreed with the member states, what railway connections will become possible, how they will become more attractive, because the connecting time is down and you have the infrastructure in place. So that's the bottom layer of the infrastructure. You had on top of that the second layer, and that was the rail traffic management. There we have something that we, and you like abbreviations, I'm sure, we call the European Rail Traffic Management System. Mm-hmm. And we've been trying to roll that out for a long, long time to make sure the trains are safely moving on these corridors and that we get the maximum out of this infrastructure that is in place. And here that's very important that you have the same system everywhere in Europe, because that's what makes rail complicated and expensive when the train has to stop at the border, switch to a different traffic management system, or even be equipped with several systems at the same time. So here we want to move to a single European system. The concept is in place. Again, our deadline is 2030 because Jeroen is absolutely right. That doesn't move very quickly if you speak about infrastructure, hard infrastructure, or digital infrastructure. Then you have the transport services. And I understand this third layer is essentially being the one about the trains and of course the railway companies operating. And it was already said by previous speakers as well, we have a 4th railway package, and that railway package needs to be implemented. It means you get rid of all the national differences in the rule book of the different technical standards, but it also means that the same railway company can deliver a service everywhere in Europe. So it's the same train being able to operate and the same company being able to operate everywhere in Europe. It also has these rules about what are the conditions for providing subsidies to the companies so that we really have a level playing field in place. And then you have this upper layer. And I think it's the upper layer that we really, really should focus on very strongly in the next few years. This is where it's the services and the interface with the passengers. And this is where the digitalization brings a fundamental change to the game that we have here. We want to move to mobility as a service. And we also, of course, want to connect the railway with the rest of the transport systems. You'd want to move as a passenger door to door, and you don't want to live in the railway station, even if you want it to be reasonably close here. So this is where I think a lot of our focus needs to be in the next years, and this is the ticketing, and it was mentioned, and it is very central, and we will want to do some improvements there. It is simply not acceptable that for airlines, you can find very many platforms that offer you this. But for railways, you have to have a pretty good idea of what you want before you can actually manage to buy a ticket. it's also, I think, the question of the suitable rolling stock, that when a company wants to enter the market, it shouldn't need to wait for a long, long time to find the trains. And it's, of course, timetabling, because it's timetabling that makes a connection attractive, and especially when it's international, that's currently very bothersome. So here what I think is that we have a lot of European initiatives on the lower levels, and we need to put our attention more on the upper levels, because you need to act at the corridor level, you need to act at the network level, you need to act at the European level. And I very much look forward, of course, to all the political support that we now have to get these things actually put in practice, closing once again with that sense of impatience that was already expressed. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Elisabeth Werner. Your impatience really comes through this to the screen. You're very passionate. Last question before we start a panel debate. I'd like to know, so what can the DG Move do to help all the others? Because we seem to be pretty much aligned on the ambition and the urgency. So what can you do from your perspective to actually help achieve these first corridor coordination projects, or this launching customer, as Wijnand referred to it?
We will certainly continue from the side of the European Commission to put our money where the mouth is and co-finance some of these projects, especially on the infrastructure and on the digital side. It is very often the cross-border projects that need that a little additional co-financing, because they are less of an interest to the national capitals than they should be for the European network as a whole. We will continue to see that the legislative framework is in place for the companies and for that market to function very well. So we will both be vigilant that it's properly implemented, but we will also, where necessary, make additional proposals. And we have several corridor relevant initiatives in mind for the work program. Last but not least, I think we need more opportunities like this one to have a discussion on where the obstacles are, because it's the fundamental demand of the passengers that will raise the volume, as you said at the beginning, the volume for the international connections to be more central to the preoccupations also of the politicians who decide and would help us to abolish all the different obstacles that remain for rail to function truly on a European scale.
Thank you, Elisabeth. Powerful comments. And I would say let's get started. We come to the end of our round of first reflections. It's time for the panel debate. Yeah, because Jeroen Kok, Wijnand Veeneman still with me here in the studio in The Hague. It breeds a lot of urgency, it breeds a lot of good intentions, but I see also in the comments from our viewers, there's some impatience. Jan Koning is literally writing, the problems mentioned have been known for decades. What is really being done to implement these problems? What kind of feeling are you standing here when we listen to all these different reflections?
I mean, first, I think Daniel was already referring to the magnificent Elisabeth, so that is inspiring. I mean, yes, of course, this is talk, but I think, well, I've been involved in this train in front of me 25 years ago. The tone of the discussion is different. The urgency is widespread, so I'm hopeful. But how can we capitalize that momentum into actions and find the launching customer? Presented by Wijnand, I think is the key for the next couple of months.
Exactly. Well, let's start to find out how to do that. Wijnand, how do you stand here? What feeling comes up when you listen to our panelists?
Well, a lot of the changes needed are discussed are those long lines of change that we need and that have been going on for quite some time already, and that bump into all kinds of realities that slow them down. And this is where I think that the approach that we talk about tries to simplify and this whole problem, bringing it down to a scale in which we can move more swiftly and deliver services on those corridors.
Exactly. It ties nicely into a comment that Jaap Modder just wrote. What are we going to do tomorrow? We know everything now. Let's get into action. Well, let's explain. We've structured this panel debate on the basis of a few statements. agree, disagree statements. And I've just launched the first one for our viewers. What is holding us back? And the first thing could be, and we've referred to it earlier, Jeroen, the national interests are the main factor curtailing the international potential of rail travel. That is our statement number one that we would like to discuss with both our panel and you. And we see that the people who are already voting, and if you join us later, you can vote via several ways. On the website, on the right side, you have this interactivity box where you can now push your option and send it in. Or you can scan the QR code with your tablet or mobile phone and use it on the side while you put our live stream on your big screen in your living room where you sit on the couch with a nice cup of coffee. We see here a quite strong opinion from our voters, at least, from our participants who vote, who say, the majority says, agree. It's the national interests that are holding us back. Where do you stand on this statement?
Yeah, and I think that is not necessarily bad because, like in Europe, we have shown that that rail can have a very substantial role in transit around cities. It's doing quite well.
Yeah.
Yet it's that international piece which is lacking. So it's, I think, in my view, not to discourage national interest, but it's about improving and increasing the international voice, as also was mentioned by Joseph.
Yeah. How about you, Wijnand? Where do you stand on this statement? Agree or disagree? Short answer first.
I totally agree there.
Totally agree.
Yeah, in the sense that there is, but I totally agree with Jeroen that there's this change dichotomy between national and international. If you don't have national services, you can get to Berlin, but you cannot get through to Germany. So this is where they are connected.
Let's see how our panel responds to this one. If I can get my panel on the screen, is there anybody of you who would vote disagree to the statement? It's the national interest that are curtailing our international efforts. Is there a disagree in my panel? Daniel, Monica? No? Everybody aligned on this one. Because that's the beauty of putting statements in. If we all agree, we don't need to discuss, right? Okay. And is there anybody, Jeroen explained it very nicely. Yeah, Joseph, please entail. How can we deal with this? What do we need to do to indeed raise that volume of the voice of international?
Well, I believe we should be a bit more nuanced. As Jeroen said, we need to acknowledge the strong role of rail in the regional, in the suburban transport, and the good contribution of the national systems. But there is also the aspect of the complexity. The complexity of running across borders is much bigger than if you stay within a single country. But we should also not hide the fact that we have made a significant progress with the Fourth Railway Package, because since 2019, we have a European authority. We have the European Union Agency for Railways giving single safety certificates for an operator that may operate across borders. And we are authorizing vehicles. Since the start of our task in June 2019, we have already authorized almost 11,000 vehicles. So this is making the international travel as simple in the future as currently the national one is. And by that, we can also include the international element and combine it with the national to create a European efficient railway network.
Yeah. So indeed, you're saying, please keep nuanced, like Jeroen is saying. There's a relation between national and international interest, and you are saying, Joseph, there's already a lot of progress being made, especially on the safety and on the infrastructure side. Yet, Joseph, I hope you agree, you feel the impatience, right? Both of our viewers and some of the members in the panel.
And impatience is very justified because progress in rail is very slow. And our message, I believe, shared by all panelists is we need to move ahead, and we need to move ahead quickly.
All right. I see a lot of nodding heads. Let's move into our second statement to see if we can get some debate there. Because Jeroen, you already kickstarted in our first very discussion here on the coffee table about the point that it's not infrastructure, right? Often we say, we want to improve international rate. Let's start with more infrastructure, better infrastructure, all these long-term investments. I launched the poll for our viewers as well. Improving international rail requires better international cooperation, not investments in infrastructure. I hear the nuance coming, Joseph, but let's polarize a little bit. Wijnand, where do you stand? Agree, disagree?
I said disagree here.
Disagree?
Disagree. Because obviously you need some investments in infrastructure, but the way that we've been thinking about it is we need these big new lines everywhere, which is the wrong way to think about it. Yes, you need services that are integrated. We started from the top and then we go down and then you have a look at what infrastructure you need to adding to the existing system. And that sometimes isn't these big honking new railway lines, but it is specific investments where on that corridor level you decide, look, we need more capacity here and this is what we should deliver.
Yeah.
So
we know the answer is end, but we're kind of looking what do we prioritize? But you say...
So there is a need for infrastructure investment. Yes, exactly. So this is where I saw the knot, and that's not right.
Okay, cool. Jeroen?
No, I mean, it's always fun to kind of try and polarize. What I would like to add, though, is and also the infrastructure is not necessarily a new connection, but it's on the international rail network, but it's also infrastructure and actually linking it with the cities that you're traveling, so the better station connections. And it was mentioned by a couple of panelists. But I think if you look at it that way, then again, if you're taking the consumer approach first, then that type of infrastructure might be even more important than another link on an already amazing network.
Let's see and hear from our panelists where they stay on that debate between cooperation and infrastructure. Monica, can I give the first floor to you? Yes. It's not infrastructure, Monica. You and your members, you are good enough. We need to better cooperate.
Yeah, no, we do this. I mean, we do this internally and externally as well. But there's a great trend, of course. I mean, if you want to do international passenger corridors, you have to look around the corner and to actually connect to other facilities. That's evident. So that's why I raised digitalization. You can do train services on demand. You can link it with, let's say, bus arrivals or airline arrivals. The classical timetable we have today, I think it will fade away and be more an intelligent, smart, on-demand timetable, maybe developed by Joseph or by the Commission or by both. And we also need to see how we connect in the future with other modes. So we have on a small scale, different transport modes. We have some members who also look into cooperation with digital companies, with other service providers. We have reached out to the airports, for example, as a ground part of aviation. We have a standing cooperation with CEDA, with our road infrastructure friends, and we have a very interesting exchange. And there's some sort of cultural gap still, but we are overcoming it. We're looking into asset management now together. We're looking into resilience. That's a very important point. How resilient is your future infrastructure network? And this is in the making of.
Wow.
And as Joseph said, we have the forced driver package is slowly distilling into on the national ground. An important point is standardization or the system architecture, for example, so that we don't have we create a variety of non-interoperable solutions in the digital sphere, which can't be plugged in and exchanged. And that is a big thing. So let's say the cooperation will naturally increase on the digital level and on the physical level.
Mm-hmm. Jeroen, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting today that Monica's focus on the digitization, and other panelists have alluded to it as well. Because that one is available to us to deliver result faster. But second, in order for digitization to work, you really need to look closely also at the governance and, for example, the rules in which you do that, and the availability of data and sharing and transparency. So it's not like this magic that can just happen, but it requires us to do actually exactly the same on the other levels, which is cooperation, and have clear rules on how you share that. And I think this is also where you can, on a European and or in a corridor perspective, try it out. Let's work together a bit more transparently and really push that digital agenda, providing better services quickly.
Exactly. So I see nodding heads. Lieber, if I can quickly turn to you, this statement about we need more cooperation, not more infrastructure. What can you elaborate a little bit on what the members of your organization can do in cooperation to achieve further improvements?
I mean, I have to say that I must repeat what I said already. We have to start from the infrastructure. And I mentioned it also on my slides. I mean, this is the key. And I would again repeat that if you wish to be competitive, and that's the key word. If you want to attract the customers, we have to be competitive. If you want to be competitive, we have to have infrastructure that offers the possibility to place the competitive services by the railway undertakings on the infrastructure. And for that reason, this marvelous 10T that has proposed or that suggested to have the high-speed network in Europe by 2035, I mean, how can you be competitive if you don't have the high-speed connected throughout Europe? So this is the principle. This will also offer the capacity for the freight, by the way, although today it's not the topic for the discussion, but we should not forget that. And this is also something that needs to be run in a parallel. So on one side, completing the network of mainly the high speed or the higher speed, and on the other side, it's to automate the network. Because if you wish to increase the capacity for more trains, for more customers on board, whether freight or passenger, we have to automate heavily. So if you talk about the cooperation, that was your word that you used, the cooperation is necessary for the system perspective, again, that would allow us to automate both on the infra side and on the passenger side, so to offer the better service for the customers. And automation for me means, again, especially to automate for the increase of the capacity. We have a number of the bottlenecks on the lines where we don't have enough capacity. And we can't double volumes of the passenger or freight if you don't have enough slots on the track. So that would be what is really the keyword here. The new lines completing the network, and the second, increasing the capacity through the automation.
Yeah. And Liebe, what are you and your members or your organization currently doing? What steps are being taken to move that further forward?
I mean, that relates to, I mean, on the infra side, obviously, it's the cooperation with the member states and obviously with the European institutions. So how to direct the investments into the infrastructure. Then, obviously, as the first step towards the automation, investing into the ERTMS. That's the first one. And the follow-up of that would be going again with the link to research and innovation. This is the tool where we can provide the conditions for the automation. So the members, if you talk about our members, obviously are hugely interested in the continuation of today's shift to rail and the future joint undertaking, having all the conditions for the future automation ready.
Mm-hmm. Werner, or Wijnand, a quick question to you. When Libor talks about corridors, he says we need to talk high speed. We need first have a high speed network. When you talk about the corridor coordination project, is that always related to high speed corridors? Or could it also be, for example, the night trains between Austria and Amsterdam now?
Clearly the latter. Yeah. So yes, eventually when you want Europe to function as a sound market for international train travel, high speed is a need. Yes, you need to deliver that. But there are all different kind of options on how to work on that. For example, night trains, like you mentioned, they require different kind of infrastructures. It's more about the total length of the travel has to be a night rather than very quickly. So this is where there are all these different kind of options, and where as soon as you start doing that, the coordination question pops up on how to do that, where then you want to work on those corridors together and develop a sound basis in which services can be provided.
Yeah, so it's an and-and. And again, in terms of low-hanging fruit, yes, you say yes, high-speed network is essential, but we can already improve the connectivity also on the existing.
I think the key is that we talk about urgency, yes? Urgency has been, and a lot of what we've talked about are long lines that we have to develop. We are not denying that. Actually, we're really underlining that.
Yeah.
However, there are a few things that you can do right now that we really need.
I want to do a third and last statement, Jeroen. We heard Joseph Doppelbauer explicitly refer to the current COVID-19 pandemic. And as you say, urgency, we need to act in the now. We're curious, for international rail passenger transport, is the COVID-19 pandemic mainly a threat or an opportunity? Where do you stand, Jeroen?
This is a very personal question, I think, because it defines how you view these kind of events. I think it's a terrible event that happens. But it forces us to rethink some of the ways we've done things. And I see this in many different sectors as well. you cannot continue the same way. It allows a reset, and it puts policy makers at the heart of where we are going, front and center. We cannot allow to say the market will solve, because there is no market.
Yeah.
So policymakers, politicians are now really at the helm. And it's scary to be at the helm, because now there's no hiding, oh, the market will solve it, because there isn't any.
The market isn't there. There's urgency. I refer to Joseph's comment about what are passengers' decision criteria. Flying across Europe was never so simple until end of February 2020. Currently, I'm looking at trips to Vienna or Paris, and I think I don't even want to be in a plane. Yet I cannot find my way how to get to a train in Vienna, right? So the whole decision drives become different.
Yes.
Wijnand, opportunity or threat, the COVID?
Opportunity in that sense, yes. So in the sense that when you think about what rail can deliver in terms of COVID safety compared to air travel, it seems to have more potential. Yes, still it's highly challenging because reduced capacity also in vehicles. How do you do that? But still, when you look at the big picture, I think there is an opportunity there.
It's interesting. We see that actually 30% of our audience, and I like it, then we have a good statement, is undecided, right? They don't know. It's difficult to call. Let's see how our panel stands on that. What can we do to actually, Daniel, if I can refer to you, another big issue on the international agenda, besides the Green Deal, now also dealing with COVID. Do you see opportunities to align the initiatives? There's huge investments being made to recover from the COVID-19 stress. Can we align objectives here?
Yeah, and I agree. I understand both sentiments, actually. Like, working for Frans Timmermans, I of course have to say that this is an opportunity, but I also understand the audience, the big proportion that is undecided, because we don't know what will exactly still hit us. It's very difficult to predict. The only thing you can do is at the European level try to help to restart things as soon as that is feasible. That's what we're trying to do by at least saying once a week, let's all look together when a certain city in a region is red, orange, and green. Let's not do that all in different times and different spaces. That is something really good work where also Commissioner Valian is involved. So I understand the uncertainty, also the uncertainty of the workers in the sector, because all modes have been hit, all transport modes have been hit heavily. But I have to say that it's an opportunity, and it's also what the highest level at the European Commission agrees with that. If you listen to the State of the European Union of Ursula von der Leyen yesterday, clearly, the way forward is to indeed rethink, reset, build back, but build back better and bounce forward, because this European spirit is needed. It's also the people that marched on the streets before that wanted. Of course, it went down a bit, the climate in terms of priorities, because people need to start taking care of making it to the end of the month rather than the end of the planet. But it's not away, and it's still on top concerns. An opportunity, that's what we're trying to do. Including with making rail digital. There will be a push in member states to come up with investments that help with the green and the digital transition. And we clearly say in our policy, think about digitizing rail. It's an easy way to tick both boxes. It's super good for sustainable travel, for the European Green Deal. It's super good for the digital future. So that is something that we need to talk about more passionately and less technically. So yes, definitely opportunity, but I do see it's not easy, and we have to do all of us the best that we can, because we can be fortunate. It is something that unites the rail, the potential of rail. It is something that young people really like, and it's also something that my father-in-law, who is a bit less progressive when it comes to the climate, and he does like his memory of night trains when he traveled. It is something that unites, and that's the spirit to seize upon.
Beautiful. Well, Daniel, since we're with you, just a smaller question that I'd like to highlight. You talk about uniting. A question from Dagmar Keim has been on the boards for quite a while, and 7 people gave that a thumbs up. But it's somewhat related to Hinne Groot, who is no longer with us here. He talked about the platform that the Secretary of State, Stientje van Veldhoven, launched to talk with all the political powers about this. And the question of Dagmar is, can the cities with international stops also join this platform, right? We're talking national here, but can the regional governments also join? Since you're close to the political heart, do you know anything about that?
Yeah, like, and I think that one can even talk about like that hopefully becomes an alliance. Platform is of course a good word to use to make sure that you work in an open format. An alliance, I think, is also a good way to talk about it. As I said, like we are committed within the European Commission to give a follow-up to that work, which is already an important thing to give the sense that everybody feels urgency. We need to start doing this. And yes, like you only get things done really in politics if you create a movement, and if cities can help in that sense, that's all the better. Because at least me personally, I would have had a happy mandate at the Commission where I can say I did my bit to not only make rail better, but just a cool way to travel across Europe, and cities can play a key role there.
We see Hinne Groot coming on air as well. He's actually still with us. I thought he'd already left. Hinne, did Daniel cover well for you? Can the cities with international connections also connect to this platform?
Well, we are starting with member states, our natural colleagues, but of course the cities are an important partner, and we have to discuss how we can liaise with the partners, because I know the cities are very active in this. So we will have to make this liaison and to see how we can use this motivation. Yeah.
Yeah. I can imagine. I was thinking, Wijnand, when you mentioned, and I keep repeating it because I like it, the launching customer concept, that there might be ambitious people in local governments, regional or city governments who say, this is the plan, let us be the corridor, right? Let me make myself strong, forget all about getting everything harmonized in Europe. I want that my city connects to Amsterdam, Paris, whatever, and take the lead.
It illustrates well that there's a different kind of conversation going on than in an open access kind of environment. Yes, so this is where indeed that's the conversation that we want to develop. That where cities can join in, that they might actually have some money available to get their city on such a corridor, and now you can use that to buy in services, develop the services, mature the market.
Exactly, beautifully. Elizabeth, since you showed us the map of the corridors, it was clear you used the word corridors, but that was another corridor than we are talking about here today. This was corridors more from a multimodal perspective, right, as I understand. I'd like to address a question that Jeroen Wolf is submitting, and 6 other viewers are saying we like that question. How do you reflect on the necessity of creating a level playing field in Europe between international rail compared to aviation, also in the light of the Green Deal? For example, no VAT on aviation fuel, no VAT on aviation tickets. From your perspective as the DG Move, can you elaborate on that a bit?
Thank you. That's a very key question that comes up often. I'm sure other panelists will want to say something. Price and market forces work to some extent in the rail sector. Other colleagues have already referred to the subsidies and the public service obligations. It is, I think, very important that it is also affordable and attractive to use the railways. And the railways, of course, have a very big part of the fixed costs. The infrastructure, we have to face it, is expensive. This being said, there is a number of measures that are ongoing where we look at the relative pricing. And here, what I really want to underline is the environmental and climate aspect, where the railways come out in the comparison as putting less costs on society compared to other modes, because they are very energy efficient. So you have less CO2 emissions and you have less road accidents, deaths, and fatalities. This is where the big advantage of railway lies, when the burden or the price really goes into the infrastructure. So once you have these tracks, and I want to really say that in Europe we have very good infrastructure, I think the compelling argument is to make maximum use of it. We have invested, member states have invested so much money into the infrastructure that now it's about smartly using it by maximizing the traffic on it. And I think the price incentives overall, when you compare the different transport modes, between the aviation, between the road transport. This is where some rebalancing can easily take place. The VAT, the fuel taxes, but also, of course, infrastructure charging are elements there. I'm extremely proud to say, for instance, that we have been able to propose and have adopted in a record time a possibility for the member states to reduce the infrastructure charges, the track access charges for the railways, to give them a boost after the COVID crisis. That's exactly the sort of incentive that would put railways in a better position compared to other modes, and they are available.
Okay, thanks for coming, Jeroen. You want to add something to that? Do I see that? No?
No, I think it's, I mean, I'm inspired. And one of the themes that was presented by the panel is in relation also to where we are today. It's not about bouncing back, it's about bouncing forward. And I think that's a good frame.
That's a good message. Well, for all the people who might have joined us later, because you've been sharing the link on #InternationalRail like crazy, I would like to ask all panelists to briefly see if you can formulate that one thing, as Jaap Modder already answered, the one thing we really should start doing tomorrow. What is your intended action? Because as we all know, it's very nice that we spend 2 hours together in a virtual room. We're in the comfort of our own homes and safety. We have coffee, we have snacks. But if we're not going to really do something with everything we've heard and talked about today, nothing is going to change. So if we can just go in the same order as we took our panel when we started. Daniel, what is the key thing you would like to urge our participants today to start doing tomorrow?
I think that you only get this done if you talk passionately about this. Make rail cool again. I think there's so much in that statement, because it's sort of like the youth that wants it. It's the hip thing about it. It's the easy ticketing. There's no point in having high speed lines only if people can't book it easily. So make rail cool again. I think that's the message for us the coming 5 years.
Beautifully. And with the year of rail coming up in 2021, I think this could be the key thing. Thank you for being with us today, Daniel Mes. Monica Heiming of the European Infrastructure Managers. What is your key final plea to our participants today? What should they do tomorrow?
I mean, I like Daniel's proposal to make rail cool again and give it a Tesla moment or a Hyperloop thing. So maybe we are a combination of everything. As infrastructure manager, making tracks cool again, have they ever been cool? I don't know. To make them look sexy and attractive, I don't know. But on the digitalization, I can make a hit. So we need really a lot of money, to bring railways into the next century and make it really the best mode of transport in the world, and also be the backbone of all the transport modes, and to really reach out to everybody in a very efficient and cost efficient and sexy manner. So
exactly. Yeah, and it is clear from your words today that you are ready and willing to move as infrastructure managers. Thank you for being with us, Monica Heiming, as well. And we move to Libor Lochman. Libor, what is your final message? What should we really start doing tomorrow if we want to speed up with all our ambitions that we share?
I will be very short. Accelerating automation and improving the customer experience. The first place, of course, the booking system.
Should be highest on the agenda, automation and ticketing booking. Thank you. Thank you for being with us on behalf of CER as well, Libor. And please stay tuned. We see Daniel switching off, but obviously we're going to soon go to our virtual networking break, which is taking place in this same Zoom meeting. So stay tuned if you want to connect with some of the participants. While I'm moving to Joseph Doppelbauer. Joseph, what is your key last plea for action for our participants?
Well, I am considering tomorrow as more short-term, and I am taking up a statement that Elizabeth has made. I believe we should make smarter use of the existing infrastructure. That means create connections. Someone mentioned the night train between Amsterdam and Vienna, for instance, but the infrastructure is there. We need to create attractive coordinations. We need to promote these connections. And we need to make these connections easily accessible to potential users via booking platforms. So this would be my message. Get on with it, get it done, create the connections and promote them.
Beautiful. Get on with it, get it done, make connections and make Rail cool again. I like it. We're really making this tweetable, right? Hashtag International Rail. Elisabeth Werner, what is your final call for action for our audience?
I'll continue with the tweetable lines. I think there are no more excuses. There is really a good framework in place and there is a lot of demand and impatience. So don't change track, change gear.
Exactly. Well, thank you for joining us as well. Let me finish with my panel here in the studio. Wijnand Veneman, what is your final plea to our audience to get into action?
So basically, I think that the possible, that we see where the complexities are, and that we provide answers on how to move forward on those complexities. They're not just the technology, they're the way that we work together and how we structure that and simplify that. I think that should make things easier. Let's do that.
Let's do that. Jeroen, and then we end together again. We started together.
Yes.
As chair of the committee for this wonderful report, and more important, this letter to the EU Commission. How do you stand here? What do you feel after 2 hours traveling through Europe virtually?
Well, I'm enthused, and I think it's about not bouncing back and restore, but it's bouncing forward. If that's cool and sexy and connected, I think that those are the right words. And I know, I feel like calling on Monday, trying to get that launching customer coalition.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to call Joseph and say, Joseph, we got a few, we got a coalition, and with your help and auspicion, can we really get this idea of a corridor manager going?
Yeah.
And start improving that product in a sexy and cool way.
I think we have our little man on the moon here, right? And we're not going to take a decade. We have the year of rail coming up in 2021. So let's speak about the ambition of having our first launching customer a corridor coordinated project in the year of rail. Shall we all sign to that?
Yes, sir.
Well, in order to do that, as Elisabeth Werner already said, the most important thing is that we keep doing things like this, connecting. But so far, it's basically been us, the 6, 7 of us talking together. But from now on, that is going to be different. Because we are opening this exact Zoom meeting that you see on the screen here for all of you to join us in a virtual lunch networking break. So if you have been participating and you would like to connect, and let me say, if our speakers have to go, I'm not sure if they were, if they knew that they were part of this. So if you have to go, you have to go. If you have time to stay, please stay, because you could actually connect to some of our participants. We're going to have a little bit of fun, make virtual meetings cool again, and then we're going to break out in smaller groups for about 12 minutes, where you can really have small peer-to-peer conversations to see on how to work on that ambition of having that first corridor coordinated project next year, or maybe something else you would like to discuss. And I think our ambition with this online event would be that if you now come to the Zoom meeting, the link is right below in the timetable. Just click on it, open Zoom, and our Sibrin will let you in. My dream would be that a few years from now, we see these beautiful corridor coordinated projects and people say, how did we get started? Oh, yeah, right. It was that virtual lunch networking session where we met on September, what is it, the 18th already today, 2020. So I invite you all, come into the Zoom. If you're watching this program in recording on YouTube, we're nearing the end. This is the end. We're going to have some more fun with the participants live. And if this is the end for you, thank you for watching. Thank you for participating. Take a time for last time via the Slido application to let us know how this experience was for you. And to be honest, and there we see some people coming. Bram van der Glint, Francis is coming, Anita is coming. So it is working. Welcome to you all. I'm closing the live stream here now, and we're going to have some fun in the Zoom meeting. Click on the link below. That's it for now on the live stream. Thank you for participating.